Sure.
Okay guys, I think I should start by now. Okay, so nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming. My name is Craig. I'm a lecturer in the psychology department, and something in addition to what I'm doing today about this workshop about Foucauldian Discourse Analysis. I've also started a qualitative research forum, which we started about 6 to 9 months ago, which is a group across the university for people doing qualitative research, primarily staff and master's students, PhD students, to try and get a sort of safe space where people can share their experiences and engage in workshops together and just undertake different activities to help one another. So this is sort of like part of this, and we've got another workshop coming in a couple of weeks where we have a PhD student at university who's going to do a session about grounded theory and her research, and we've been doing some other activities over the last few months as well. We've been doing stuff about reflexivity, and we've had some other PhD students talk about their research. So if that sounds of interest to you, and you think you might benefit from that, we'd love it if you could come along. There's a register going around, so if you do want to be part of the group, there's an email group that we've got where we send around messages and keep in contact. So just add your email address to the register, and you can become part of the group and keep in contact. Okay, so today then, the session is about a theoretical and hands-on introduction to Foucauldian Discourse Analysis. So I've been using this approach in some of my research, and recently published an article with Chris, who's sitting over there, wave your hand, which was how do men's magazines talk about penises? So we use this approach for Foucauldian Discourse Analysis in that article, and so I find it really useful, and I thought it would be useful to share this with you in case it's got some connections with your own work, and you might get something from it, and maybe we can start to continue discussing this further in the future. Okay, so this is what's going to happen today. So to start with, we're going to start with an activity where I'm going to get you guys to analyse the language of the media. So you're going to jump in at the deep end and start doing Foucauldian Discourse Analysis before you even know you're doing it. Okay? Then afterwards, we're going to look at the key assumptions of social constructionism. So typically when I teach this, so I teach this on to second year undergrads in psychology. And when I typically teach it, I normally start with social constructionist theory first. So social constructionist theory is like the ground, it's like the base level, and then we're building on top of that. So typically I go for the assumptions, then I give them the activity. But for you guys, I thought it would be more fun just to jump in with the activity first and then work out the assumptions afterwards. Okay, so that's what we're going to do first. And after we've done that, I'm going to introduce you to Foucault's concepts of discourse, power, and knowledge. So here we're talking about Michel Foucault, quite a famous philosopher and historian. And we're going to build his ideas on top of this social constructionist theory. Then after that, there's going to be another activity where I'm going to get you guys to recount a good night out, and about how you retell the experience of a good night out to your parents or your friends, and also to your children, if you've got children. Okay. Then we'll have a break for 10 minutes. So hopefully this will take about 50-55 minutes, and we'll have a break. Then we're going to outline the 6 steps of Foucauldian Discourse Analysis. So there's different forms of Foucauldian discourse analysis, there's different forms of discourse analysis, but the ones that I'm going to teach you about today, and the ones that you're going to engage with, is by a person called Carla Willig. So she's got a specific set of steps, which we find quite useful, I find quite useful. And then afterwards, they're going to engage in another activity in groups, where you're going to put these steps into practice, and you're going to analyse a pop music video by PlanBUK called She Said. Okay, so it's a mix of a bit of teaching, but also some activities as well. Okay? And then finally, to finish off, we'll have some reflections on the workshop and future research. So I'll ask you to reflect on what you got from the workshop, and maybe how you might take some of the things you learned forward in your own research. Okay. So here is a long list of useful readings. So I gave you, everyone should have a handout. If you've not got a handout, just put your hand up. So on here, you got slides, and so you can look at these at another time. I've put the 3 useful readings in orange, which are probably the ones I would suggest to go to first, if you want to read more. So the top one here in orange is Social Constructionism by Vivian Burr. So that's like a book that's got a whole range of chapters about social constructionist theory. But the first one is What is Social Constructionism? So that'd be a good place to start. There's also a very nice introductory reading to Foucault, if you've not come across any of his work before. So there's a nice chapter here by Stuart Hall. We're focusing on the concept of power, knowledge, and discourse, which are the 3 concepts we're going to engage with today. And at the bottom, there's a chapter in Carla Willig's book which is Introducing Qualitative Research in Psychology, and she's got a specific chapter about Foucauldian Discourse Analysis. So the steps we're using today are directly taken from this chapter. And there's also a range of other chapters here, primarily in psychology books, but they apply like beyond psychology, where they look at discourse analysis. So most of these other chapters discuss Foucauldian discourse analysis, but they also discuss another form of discourse analysis, which is called discursive psychology, and they look at the similarities and differences. But today we're just going to look at one type. Okay. So if you want to do some further reading, I suggest you go there. Okay. So to start with then, an activity. I'm going to show a video, and I'd like you to analyse the language of this video. And I want you to watch the video and consider the way in which language constructs reality. The way in which language constructs reality. So in other words, what I'm asking you to do is think about what are the people doing with their talk? What are they doing? What is the effect or the consequence or the function of using specific words rather than other words? And then afterwards, I want you in your groups, on your tables, just to share your thoughts, take some notes if that's helpful for you, and then you can feed back your thoughts and we can have a quick discussion about these questions, okay? About how language is constructing reality and what people are doing with their talk. Okay. Yes.
Funny how the media covers white riots versus black protests. Seems like when the protesters are black, the media uses some pretty harsh words.
The bad guys, lawlessness, looting, wild animals,
Thugs. Isn't it the right word?
However, if you're white and you're tearing up the city because of a game, you're just young people.
Young people danced on it, flipped over cars as UK fans did stupid things.
Maybe got a little out of control.
Seeing a scene like this just shows how passionate the UK fans are.
It's so tough to lose, and unfortunately the ugly side that we sometimes see in sports.
And notice how the police always show up to a black protest in military-grade equipment, and yet the media claims they're just doing nothing.
It's inexplicable why the police are doing nothing. Let's mobilize the National Guard. If I'm a rider and I see the police doing nothing, I might feel like I have a license. Who would?
But in white riots, the cops actually are standing around doing nothing.
Another group of cops over there just standing there.
No one's really doing anything.
These guys look like they could be watching a parade. And why is it that the leadership of the black community is always called into question?
Where is the leadership? The black leadership.
The absence of leadership.
And it goes back to leadership, but that leadership has to come from the community.
But no one ever questions the leadership of white parents who let their kids burn down and vandalize the college campus.
Suggest young college students who think their plans are kind of a game with police officers.
No, sometimes they don't even call a white riot a riot.
Party gone awry.
Some fans got a bit too rowdy after the win.
Spew a bloody brawl. There was some type of altercation.
Waco, 170 arrested, 9 people dead.
They're not thugs.
Baltimore, no deaths, but it's a riot, chock full of thugs. What if the media portrayed white rioters, same as black protesters? Let's switch the audio and see how it plays out.
Breaking news, violent protest.
What you're looking at is the unraveling of the civil society.
Criminals and thugs.
And they're raising hell and they're destroying property.
These idiotic thugs, rioting and looting, are hurting their own people.
Wild animals burning buildings down.
Especially if they know the media's all there. I got the cameras on everyone. It's become its own reality show.
Who acts like that towards a police officer?
Think for yourself. Don't let racist media color your perceptions. Demand fairness in media coverage. How the media can put an end to calling black people thugs.
Right, okay then, so I'll give you a couple of minutes now to think about the video you just watched and think about what are people doing with their talk? In other words, what effect or consequence is there from using specific words instead of others? Okay. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a chat in your group and then you can feed back and your thoughts. Okay, you want to come back? Okay, so the question was, how is language constructing reality? In other words, what are people doing with their talk? And what's the effect or consequence or function of talking about one thing in one way and not another? Okay, any thoughts in relation to the video we just watched?
We talked about the use of the word animal, and so we think that the effect of that is to dehumanise, maybe?
So they're talking about animals, weren't they? But Like I think it was with one group that wasn't it?
Oh right, sorry, yeah, for black people.
Yes, yeah. So it was like just be one group, they were talking about them as animals, and a few that was dehumanising them. They're not sorry, they're not humans anymore. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Good stuff. Anything else? Anyone else picked up?
Yes, Greg. Yeah, we talked a lot about sort of where blame should lie, so directing our attention to which focal point where we should be putting our blame. And control was a big thing. In fact, our map really representing our view, sort of like where, controlling in terms of controlling society. So these thugs. Clearly, this is not how to behave. Other than they have very good reason to behave in such a way.
So you blame those individuals for the problem, and like.
But that's by using from the discourse. That's the trade. They're thugs, Craig. It shouldn't happen.
Thugs. So, like, what image is that building up for you, thug? Thug is someone like aggressive, dangerous person,
uncontrollable.
Uncontrollable people. Okay. How about the other group, like the white group? How were they represented, and how did you make sense of like the way that they were represented in contrast to the black Americans?
I think you've got the problem of double narrative going on. It's not. We felt there are two possible discussions that we had. We're talking about his claims to say yes, that there is a motive and there's this empowering language, prejudicial language, and you're being swayed by language being used in the media. Or are we analysing how he was presenting the claims, which I think was also open to analysis. Because I felt quite strongly that if he's going to say that look at this terminology, it's swaying you to believe. Why aren't we using this terminology more effectively? Why are we discriminating? Why are we calling these people sensible, these people young people not seen? And yet I didn't feel that reporting was in itself unbiased. I thought it was problematic, which I thought was an interesting double play.
Okay then, yes, you picked out a point that's never come up before when I've done this with my students. So typically, you just go for the differences between like the way the black people are represented the white, and you picked up this extra element of actually there's language is being used specifically by the narrator, who's got his own agenda, who's trying to argue and make a certain argument as well.
Then we need to be
so
not fall into that.
Right.
So we were saying these people are biased. So I think it's beautiful on him what his own language.
Except that he wasn't saying these people are being, his point wasn't these people are being biased, the point was the media reporting in ways which are racist. So in keeping with what presumably he said actually, he wasn't making an academic point, was he, or an intellectual point, in the sense of, what we're discussing. Use of language, he was saying this isn't, he was clearly trying to make a clear point. And in that sense, he was effective, wasn't he?
He was effective, but then he said, why do white parents let their children riot on campus, which I thought was it.
So there's blame again.
I think he did make a very clear point about blame being unfairly attributed because of the use of language, which I think was a really interesting debate.
Well, I think there's a commonality between like both focuses, as in neither set of language, whether it's the media or whether it's the narrator, the language is both constructing reality. So he's not neutral himself. He doesn't have this neutral objective view. He's also got his agenda and his arguments which are coming through. So you still picked up what I would assume, for the white versus black, but also with the narrator as well. Okay, great. So, any other points you thought of before we move on?
Yeah, we made the point that visual is also a form of language. You can't just separate words and pictures. They feed in.
So how did the language sort of construct reality to you? Like what was going on in terms of...
Well, they're selective in what they show. And also the words then put value on the thing.
So the choice of what they were focusing on and like where the camera was pointing.
Sure, it's part of that, but also you can have a similar image, but then the actual words colour it in a certain way.
So you've got like an interaction between the images that you see and also the language. Yeah, most definitely, yes. So that is, sorry, I keep stepping in front of that, so that is like one of the historical critics of discourse analysis. It started by primarily looking at language and the role of language and how it constructs reality, but there's also now this broader focus to consider other aspects, like language in the broad sense, not just words, but also visual images and body language and all these kinds of things and how they interact with occasion. Okay, so that was like jumping in at the deep end, just to get straight in, just 'cause I thought that would be enjoyable. Now I'm going to talk about some of the aspects of social constructionism that underpin like what I'm trying to do here. Oops, sorry for that. Before I just jump into social construction, I just wanted to clarify that, to show this. This is like a rough an image of the continuum of research. And when quantitative researchers do research, it's like underpinned by certain assumptions, and it's useful to like know what assumptions are underpinning your research. It's useful to know where social constructionism and Foucauldian Discourse Analysis is located. So, just to clarify then, when we're doing research, we can think about three things. We can think about ontology, which is what can we know, or another way of thinking about this is what is reality? Question, what is reality? So on the one hand, you might fit on this side, and you might be a realist. You might assume that there's one reality. So for today, if we're looking at the room today, you might assume there's one thing happening here, there's one reality. Okay? But on the other end of the scale, you might be a relativist, and you might assume there are multiple realities. So in this context, you might say, actually, what's happening here today is different from each one of us. My reality is different from your reality versus yours. You're sitting in different places, you're experiencing this workshop differently. Okay. The next question, or the next issue is epistemology. So here is how can we know, how can we gain knowledge about these different realities? So on the one hand, you might be a positivist, and you might argue that we need to be scientific, we need to follow scientific methods, we need to be objective, and be reliable with our research. On the other hand, you might take a social constructionist perspective, which assumes that knowledge is created through dialogue, through people, through interaction, and through our engagement in everyday life. Okay? And then you've got a question about what form of methodology you want to take, whether you want to undertake quantitative methods and like do experiments and systematic, like reliable scientific approaches, or whether you're more interested in qualitative research and trying to explore the meaning that people make out of life. So these are the choices that we need to make in terms of our research and the assumptions that underpin them. And just to clarify, Foucauldian Discourse Analysis is right over here at the extreme end, which for some people is quite challenging, especially for my psychology students, who spend most of their undergraduate degree on this side of the continuum, and then they have to jump over here. So it'd be interesting to like figure out later, maybe we can discuss is where you guys have come from in terms of your research, and now we're over here, we need to try and engage with these challenges. So I just thought I'd put that out there, just to start us off. I'm just going to give a quick overview now of the key assumptions of social constructionism. And if you want to read more about this, I suggest you go to Vivian Bird's chapter 1, What is Social Constructionism? I've more or less summarised her main arguments in the next couple of slides. Okay. So social constructionism, which is like underpinning what we're going to do today, is it can be considered a paradigm, which is a worldview, a general framework of assumptions. So it's like the assumptions that are underpinning our research, which we're building on top of, in terms of those issues I just discussed, in terms of reality, knowledge, and what method you want to use. So there's no agreed definition of what social construction is, but there's like some key assumptions that underpin it. So one of the key assumptions is that we take a critical stance in relation to taken for granted knowledge. So such as challenging what it means to be objective or unbiased knowledge and natural categories. So here, for example, we're going to argue that it's actually impossible to do objective and unbiased research. From the start of our very topics that we choose, that we have a passion in this topic, it's more or less impossible. And we're going to challenge the idea that there's natural categories. So lots of categories about life are taken for granted, like man and woman, or black and white, like I'm a white man. You know, we're going to challenge that these are natural, biologically existing categories that just exist. We're going to think about them, about how they're constructed by people, how they're socially constructed. Okay. With this in mind, we have to engage with historical and cultural specificity. This means when we're trying to understand things that are going on in society, we have to locate them within their specific historical and cultural context and understand how we make sense of them in those contexts. So for example, if you went back in time, for example, and you wanted to understand, like my area of expertise is masculinity. If I wanted to understand what it is to be masculine, if I went back in time in England, it would be different, understood differently. Or if I got on a plane and went to another part of the world, what it means to be masculine would be different. Yeah? They construct it differently. Okay. Another key assumption is that knowledge is sustained by social processes. Yeah, that sounds like a bit of a mouthful. So So what we're trying to say here is that knowledge or truth is constructed by dialogue between people. So like the knowledge we create in our everyday lives, or the knowledge we create through research, is created through us engaging with one another in everyday life through conversations. And then through these conversations, through this dialogue and interaction, we produce knowledge. Okay. The next assumption is that knowledge and social action go together. So here we're saying that our constructions of the world enable and constrain action. Right? So what we're trying to say here is that the knowledge we produce about how we should act and the knowledge about life enables us to do things. So for example, again coming back to my topic of masculinity, the knowledge we create in our society about the way a man should act or how it is to be masculine enables me as a man to do certain things. For example, I can burp and fart in public, I can scratch and be rude, and I don't know, what else can I do? Traditionally manly things like get drunk and be sick and sit with my legs apart. But then at the same time, this knowledge we create about what it is, what's acceptable for man, it also limits me as well. So for example, I might not be able to cry in public, or I might not be able to take care of my appearance and these kind of things. So the knowledge we create in relation to different topics and different areas enable us to do stuff that also constrain us. Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Go for it.
I just noticed that in that knowledge of social action, the examples you used are very personal and individual.
Right.
I'm just wondering if you would, before we move on, whether you'd say something about knowledge and social action in terms of social justice, efforts to change society, some of the more political or communal aspects.
If maybe you think about laws, like these are knowledge about, maybe based upon morals or about what society thinks is right and wrong. But based upon this knowledge we create about what is right and wrong, what's criminal, what's not criminal, that enables us and constrains us to do different things. And what the law is now is different than what it was 100 years ago, which enabled and constrained us differently as human beings. So maybe, which will be different in the future. So maybe you can do something now, for example, I can smoke weed on the street and get arrested, but then I can go on holiday to Amsterdam where it's completely legitimate to smoke marijuana, and a knowledge there that supports that that's a viable thing, and I won't be put in jail. So the laws, the knowledge we create in society, whether it's laws or whether it's more personal things, enable and constrain our actions, through policing and more explicit stuff like that, but also more subtle things like what we believe to be right or wrong sort of influences our actions, and we take that on board. So does that example maybe help a little bit more?
Yes, it does, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got some examples coming afterwards. We've got a nice example. Like I've got an example about alcoholism and some other examples about homosexuality, which will come afterwards, which maybe clarify this point afterwards.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to keep up.
No.
I think what I'm getting, what strikes me is social action for me often relates to social justice.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, much larger. But it's not a massive point.
I think social action here is just activities we engage in.
Yeah?
Actions we engage in,
Yeah.
Okay. So the next point is anti-essentialism. Okay, so here we've got a critique of mainstream psychology and ideas such as individualism and looking for causes of behaviour beyond biology, evolution and psychological states. Okay, so what we're trying to argue here is that we're not looking for the causes and the solutions for problems or for understanding people within the person. So we're not, for example, in psychology, I'm not going to try and explain context by looking inside someone's head or inside someone's body for the explanation, or I'm not going to try and blame them for the problem. Okay, so here we're not trying to look at biology or evolution or psychological states. We're more interested in the social context and historical context to try and explain what's going on. And we're going to argue that there's no essence. That's where the anti-essentialism comes from. There's no essence. There's no essence to who I am. Like there's no internal. There's no internal essence for who I am. Who I am is created by my culture, my society, through my engagement and socialisation in everyday life. Okay, we'll try and get another example in a sec. So we've got a couple more points, and then there's an example that will hopefully bring this together a bit better. Okay, another assumption is that we question realism. So we're going to argue that there's no such thing as an objective fact. So from this perspective, we assume that all knowledge is partial, from one perspective, so everyone looks at an issue from a specific perspective with vested interests. And there's more than one way or version of an event. So your example was really good, Jane. Yeah, where in the video we had like these different media sources constructing the event in different ways, and they've got their own vested interest, they've got their own agenda. But then, interestingly, you point out actually the narrator, he's got his own agenda as well. So he's constructing the event in different ways. So we've got all these multiple ways, but then it's not as if maybe one perspective is right or objective. From this perspective, we say none of them are right or objective, they're all partial viewpoints. Okay? Right. And then we've got an argument that language is a precondition for thought. So a quote here directly from BUK. She says, the way a person thinks, the very categories and concepts that provide a framework for meaning for them are provided by the language they use. So here we've got this idea that the way like we make sense of ourselves, and talk about ourselves and talk about society is based upon the concepts that our society gives us. The way I make sense of myself as a white, heterosexual British man, I have to make sense of myself in those ways, more or less, because I'm limited by what society gives me, like the concepts I've got to use to make sense of myself. And the way we think about our society is based upon the concepts and the language we've got to play with. Okay. And the last point, before we move on, is that language is a form of social action. So here we've got the idea that language is active, it's not passive. Language does things, it constructs the world. So here we're arguing that language it's not passive, so it's not this transparent medium where I have some ideas in my head and I perfectly convey them to you. Here we're thinking more about language as in it's doing things, it's helping us do things, but here language is helping me maybe teach, or maybe it's helping me present myself as a fairly decent lecturer, or maybe if I say, will you marry me? You say, yes, I will. Through language we can get married, or we can do a whole range of different activities and actions through our language. Okay. Right. There's quite a lot to take in there, I think. And normally I sort of present the concepts first and then we apply them in the video. But I thought it would be maybe nice if you guys jump in with the video. But any questions at the moment? I'm going to give a quick example in a second which you can have a look at. But any questions at the moment in terms of these ideas I was talking about? You got a question?
I'm actually,
go on.
I've been looking at Dorothy Sowell's writes on suffering, and she has a category, or she takes it, she's a category called mute suffering. And she says that theology can't be, you can't do a theology of suffering, for example, with a person who's in a state of mute suffering. So they're suffering so great you can't bring it to speech. Because she says that language is, theology presumes that there's a common language, shared language.
Okay.
I just throw that back at you because it's made me think I might go back and look at what I've written. Is that, in other words, and I've also thought about language as a precondition for thought. Where does that leave people in catatonic state or in people with language impairment? And there might be other ways in which we can interpret language, but without words. You see where that's the question, if you...
Yes, it's like an extreme example to try and like pick the holes in like where this might not apply, I think. So, off the top of my head, I've not really thought about those extreme examples before, so they're very challenging for me to think about. I guess I would go back to maybe before these people experience these states, they've been brought up in a system where they've thought through language, haven't they? Their development as children was through the use of language, through learning to read and write. And so even if at some point maybe you don't have that ability to use language in that sense, in the formal spoken sense, maybe even before you were still made sense and constructed your world and who you are through language, even if you can't speak now. And even if I lose my voice and I can't speak, I still make sense of myself through language. With that, is that partly an answer, possibly?
Yeah, partly. I'm not looking for a definitive answer, it's just more about just raising it as a slide, as a thought.
Yeah. It is a difficult one to think through, yeah. And that is a very challenging one, so I'd have to think and talk with you more about that. So through language and conversation, we can try and make sense of this a little bit.
Yes, so maybe if you think in terms of language as words, symbols, thoughts. Yeah. And therefore there are other languages. I mean, because I'm saying in what I'm trying to write, saying actually we can attempt to do theology without shared language, so that you can somehow achieve some understanding or communication with people who
almost definitely, like when I go travelling and I go to a different country where I don't speak the same language, I can still communicate with people, but we still have our languages that we're using, whether they're different ones or not. Okay. But maybe to make this, to give an example to try and bring this a bit more accessible. An example from alcoholism. So I just want you to just read through this by yourselves and think about how language is constructing reality and to see if this helps you make sense of what I've been talking about. Okay. Come back to your question in a second. So based on this example, in what ways could we, how do you understand that alcoholism can be constructed? Does this explanation help you make sense of this idea that alcoholism can be constructed? Okay, so I'll give you a minute then in your groups to talk about and give me feedback. In what ways do you understand that alcoholism is a constructed concept or that it can be constructed? Okay. And that language is doing something. Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to discuss that and give me feedback, your thoughts. So in what way could you understand alcoholism as a constructed concept? In what ways is it constructed? Any thoughts? Does this help you understand what you get?
What term they use is secondary. What they're saying is we've got a problem.
Any thoughts? I heard lots of conversation here. Can you just share what you were discussing?
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things we started with was how do you define alcoholism before you start looking at all the values and constructions? Because for some people that means you've got an internal problem, however you judge it, and for other people it means anybody with a problem with alcohol, which lead to the same thing. And then I have the example of Alcoholics Anonymous, that they work by you admitting you're an alcoholic. But again, what does that mean? Are they just doing anything more than saying, I've got a problem?
So it means that they are addicted and they know it.
Yeah,
that's what
they've got a problem.
But what is addiction?
You can't do without it. That's addiction.
So from what I understand, the different ways you construct, who is to blame? Is it your own fault? And then if it's your own fault, is it something inside, or is it because you're in a culture where there's lots of problems with it? Is it a wider issue? And then you've got the results, different effects or consequences or moral blaming depending on how you construct it. How about this group here? What are you discussing? I know you. Okay, so for me, I use this example in my teaching because I do let students focus on alcohol and drinking amongst students. And so I quite like this example because it talks about if you define alcoholism as illness, you have certain consequences, it's not necessarily your fault. But then if it's seen as a moral problem, then you're to blame. So the way we construct different concepts has different effects. Okay. Right, to take this further, an activity that I give students, an independent study task that you guys can do if you would like, is to watch this video. There's a video here, if you click on the link, by Ken Gergen, who's one of the most famous social constructionists. And it's a really great video where he starts initially just by talking about this thing, this object, this object which I've got in front of me. And then he talks about how different groups, different communities talk about this object in different ways. Whether you're a scientist, whether you're a chemical engineer, whether you're an environmentalist, whether you're an artist. And depending on which community you're from, you construct this object in different ways, and it's got different effects, and it might be a beautiful piece of art, or it might be a piece of pollution that's destroying the world, depending on where you're coming from. Okay, so it's a real simple example that I ask students to think about, what is this? And then if you continue watching the video, it goes and discusses Foucault and social constructionists a bit more. Okay, but I'll let you do that at home if you want. Okay, so to start with, then I tried to build the base of social constructionism, and then we're building Foucault and Foucauldian Discourse Analysis on top of this. Here is Michel Foucault. Has anyone heard of Michel before? Anyone read his work? Anyone engaged with it before? Yeah. Yes, so we've got a few people, but a few people have never, is this the first time for a few people coming across his work? Or? Okay, it seems like most people have engaged with it a little bit then. So he is a French philosopher. He died in 1984, and he did a wide range of work, but what we're going to draw upon today is his three concepts of discourse, power and knowledge. Okay. So I'm just going to go through and try and give you a bit of information about what these three concepts are, and then there'll be an activity afterwards where you guys are going to put it into practice again. Okay. So first, discourse. So this term is used differently by different theorists. So in a wide range of disciplines, people use this concept. But today, we're going to use it specifically about how Foucault defined discourse. Okay. So Foucault defined the concept of discourse as a system of statements which construct an object, or another quote is a group of statements which provide a language for talking about or way of representing knowledge about a particular topic at a particular historical moment. So here is this idea that it's a group of statements, a group of ideas that help us make sense of something, a topic or an object, whether it be masculinity or beauty or whatever issue we're looking at. Yeah, it's just different ways, different groups of statements that help us make sense of those things. Okay. So the concept of discourse is also used in like two different ways. One is in a general sense and one is in a specific sense. So I just wanted to clarify this just to make it a bit clearer. So discourse in general sorry, getting my words mixed up. The discourse constructs a topic through socially constructed meaning-making processes that allow people to make sense of some aspect of reality. So here we're talking about discourse as in like a form of interaction where we're drawing upon social processes, like meaning-making processes, like dialogue, where we're like in conversation trying to make sense of things. So we might talk about this as a form of discourse, us today engaging in conversation. And then we've got the concept of discourses with an S on the end, so multiple, where these specific discourses take the form of groups of statements that provide a language for talking about and a way of representing knowledge about a particular topic. So here we might say that there's like multiple discourses that make sense of one issue. So be that sex, drinking, alcohol, there's multiple discourses, multiple sets or groups of ideas. In terms of discourse, also to think about it in terms of it's a multimedia form. So Foucault argued that discourse never consists of one statement, one text, one action, or one source. The same discourse will appear across a range of texts and as forms of conduct at a number of different institutional sites within society. So here we've got this idea that discourse can be found in multiple places. For example, if we were talking about my area of expertise, which is masculinity, and I'm trying to make sense of like the traditional forms of masculinity in our society, we might look at particular stories about masculinity. We might look at video. We might look at monuments and architecture where we've got pictures of famous men in specific poses with big muscles. Or we might look at magazines and we might piece together a common set of ideas, a common set of discourse about traditional masculinity. So it can be found in different places. Okay. Yeah. So here's just another quote. Basically, what I'm saying. Yes, discourses can be reproduced through multimedia text in a range of different places. And so in our analysis, when we're trying to piece together what are the discourses in society, we're going to find pieces of discourse. So we might find a piece of discourse here and a piece there which is similar but in different contexts, but saying similar things. Okay. Right, so that's the concept of discourse. Any questions at the moment about discourse before we move on to power relations and knowledge? Any questions or concerns? Okay. Right, so we've got power relations and knowledge, the other two concepts we're going to draw upon. Okay, so according to Foucault, power is not fixed or held by groups. Rather, it's a relation between forces. So where there's power, there's resistance. Okay, so Foucault's understanding of power, it emerged, he was trying to argue against popular Marxist views about what power was when he was writing. So at that time, the dominant understanding was that power was held by certain groups. So in terms of Marxism, they were interested in the power differences between the bourgeoisie, the people who owned the factories and had lots of money. So there's a typical argument that they held the power, that they owned the machinery, they controlled, and yeah, it was their possession. Whereas the people who were working in the factories, like the poor people, like the working classes, they had no power. And another example is possibly some forms of feminism, like some forms of radical feminism, might argue that men have the power, or they have more power, whereas in women possibly don't possess power. Where Foucault was trying to argue against this and said, rather than it being a possession, it's more a relationship between people. It's a relationship. So here he's thinking about how people are trying to get people to influence the actions of others. So for example, today maybe I'm trying to influence you guys to sort of maybe draw upon some of these ideas and learn from the workshop, but then you guys are also active here as well. So you might not be enjoying it, or you might not think it's very good. So you guys are also in a relationship with me, where you guys might get bored or fall asleep or walk out. So there's a relationship between us. And also maybe next week I might come to your workshop. So there's a different relationship where next week you might be the teacher or the workshop leader and I'll be the student in your class. Okay, so we've got shifting power relations. It's not one person has it and one person doesn't. It's shifting forces. Okay. But based on this idea, Foucault argued that discourses are produced within these complex power relations, and actors and institutions work to establish dominant interpretations of reality. Yeah. Okay. And move on. So, people who engage in discourse analysis and who follow Foucault's work are interested in exposing the implicit values and hidden assumptions underpinning taken for granted knowledge. So here we're trying to think about what's not being shown by drawing upon different discourses and trying to challenge dominant interpretations. And they're also interested in critiquing knowledge that legitimizes inequitable institutional practices. So often, lots of people who do discourse work are trying to challenge things about sexism and racism and homophobia and these kinds of things, and trying to challenge things that they find inequitable. Okay, so one example that I wanted to give you was about homosexuality and how it's socially constructed through discourse. But I was going to quickly read out an example of this, but I'll just give you a copy of this before we leave instead, and we'll just move on to the activity. I think that'll be more productive. Okay, so the group activity then, to try and put these ideas into practice, is I want you guys to imagine recounting your experience of a really good night out. Okay, so imagine the best night out you've had, or an amazing night out you've had. Okay, and then I want you to recount telling that to your friends, telling the story to your friends of what happened. And then on the other hand, I want you to choose to either tell it to your parents, to your partner, or to your child. Okay? So when I do this with students, I always tell them to tell their parents, but maybe because we've got a different age range here, I thought you could choose either your partner or your child. So first, imagine a great night out, and then think about telling it to your friends or your partner, your parents or your child. In your group, discuss the following questions and have a chat and be willing to feedback. Would you provide the same account? Would you tell the same story about what happened on a night out to these different people? Why or why not? And what are the consequences of these actions? What are the consequences of recounting the experience in one way or another? Okay? So I'll give you like 4 or 5 minutes in your groups, have a chat about this, and then you can feedback. Okay? Oh, off you go. Okay, so imagine it's a good night out, and does someone have an example they could give us? And then would they tell the same account to these different types of people one by one?
I'll start, because we've got a really great night out.
Okay.
We've been to see Schindler's List, digitally remastered version at the local picture house. We had a meal before. That's our great night out.
Right, okay.
We only got as far, and what we'd do, if we had the time, was to actually look at how we tell it to the different groups, and how we'd edit that. And I made the point, it's kind of version of power relations, isn't it? Of what hold they have on us, of how we think we should tell it and how they'll react and so on. We only got as far as the child.
Okay.
And we got as far as saying, we might say something like, it was nasty and people got killed by nasty people. And then we've got an example of perhaps the mother of that family, or whoever, father, whatever, saying, we don't want that talked about, this action. You've got that dynamic. That's as far as we got.
Okay. So already you've got an edited version to one group.
Yeah, to all groups.
And it's based upon who that is, because it's children. Okay. Okay. How about another group? Does someone else have another example of a really good night out? Most students I talk to, they get really, really drunk, but no one's ever said they've got to Schindler's List before. Okay. Another example from you guys who did talk about the 2 different groups?
Yeah, first we'd like to apologise very obviously for this power relation here. We didn't actually do your task. We did about Donald Trump's letter in the news this morning. So he wrote his own, I don't know whether you saw it.
No, I haven't seen that one.
So for the election he wrote his own medical report, and he signed it off by a doctor saying he was potentially one of the most healthiest presidents that could be. So he wrote about a certain discourse about himself, about how healthy he is, strong, everything like that, and so he wrote it himself, and the doctors come out now saying that he didn't write it, and the White House has yet to respond and stuff like that, but we thought that was quite an interesting discourse and debated that in terms of the image he was trying to portray in order to win the election. Some people will probably accept it and others.
So the example of how he's trying to construct his own reality through language and through constructing an image of himself, and that's got knock-on effects, possibly, or consequences.
Yeah, it's something I'm going to do now,
Okay. How about this group here? Did you talk about a really good night out?
I think I was prepared to admit to an example.
Right. Generally?
Yeah, generally speaking.
Okay.
I think we talked about working. We might tell, our parents would actually be very interested. We might modify how we said it to them, but they would be interested, whereas...
How would you modify it if you were talking to your parents about what you did?
Well, I don't think we got that far, because we're also clean things.
Okay.
But the interesting thing for us came up was that parents would be interested and like to know the news of your life, and actually a friend might not, so it was a general consideration as a human being. And the interesting point from this end of the table was what we might be modifying is because we're very conscious of how we want the other person to perceive us. So that's, we don't want to say to the child, actually you're going to smoke a joint, and it's okay for us, but it's not okay for you.
Right.
But also the suggestion was maybe not just was admitting and having a night out, but we would have to modify because we were concerned about how people perceive us.
So there's lots of self-perception management in relation to these other people. So you're managing what type of person you are. I'm a good person, I'm a law-abiding person, versus no, I'm a really interesting person and I had this amazing night.
Or being a considerate element for you.
Okay.
It was more sensitivity to somebody else. That was, it was not wanting to, go on about what you have to do out of compassion for another person. But we had a very interesting non-life.
Okay. Well, I had 3 examples today that I've never heard before. Okay, so normally what comes up, I'll tell you what comes up. With students, we have students who get really, really drunk, and they talk about, when they talk to their parents, most students say they don't tell them much about what happened. They say, no, I was very sensible, I had a few drinks and went home. But then when they talk to their friends, they say, oh yes, it was amazing, and with some friends, I tell them everything. And then I try and challenge them to say, okay, was one of these the truth? Was it that you lied to your parents, and you lied to your parents, but you told your friends the truth? And some of them say yes, some of them say no. Some say yes, I say, but what happened if you talked to a different group of friends? Would you tell the same? And they say, no, well, I tell these friends this and those friends that. So we're trying to get to this idea that one recounting of the experience is not the truth. Even when the students say, I told them everything, that, I think they're trying to do what you are trying to do. They're trying to make themselves interesting. Or, like, if I have a great night out and I tell people about, I did this, I did that, I'm still trying to convey how cool I am, or how awesome I am, how interested I am. But I didn't tell them everything. I didn't say, yes, I sat in the toilet, and I went and ordered one drink. It's still an edited version. Okay. Right. Okay. I think we should have a break there. So far then, we've got the social constructionism ideas, then we've got the ideas of discourse, and then in the second half, we're actually going to put this into practice and do some Foucauldian discourse analysis. Okay. So I'll give you like a 10-minute break, and then we'll start up again. Okay, so in the first half so far then, we've got the theory of social constructionism as our base, and now we're going to start building on top of that. We've built on by looking at some of Foucault's core concepts of power, knowledge, and discourse. Now we're going to actually use Foucauldian discourse analysis and work through that, and so I'll briefly outline steps, and then we'll give you some time to actually go through them yourself with a worked example. Okay. Right, so there's just one point that I want to raise generally about Foucauldian discourse analysis is that there's not one right way to do it. Okay, so it's quite a flexible approach. So a quote here by Holt, he says that the procedural prescription is both theoretically problematic and difficult to articulate, as it's rather an intangible and idiosyncratic process. So basically, we're going to go through some steps, but even though we have these steps, it's actually quite flexible, and like you might take those steps and use them differently. Okay, so it's not a rigid approach. So Eva Willig, whose steps we're going to use, she says that her steps are a way of approaching the text and not necessarily a recipe for a correct correct analysis. So lots of people do follow these steps, some people adapt them, it's up to you how you want to engage with them. And the final point is that Foucauldian discourse analysis is more about conducting the analysis in the spirit of post-structuralist inquiry. So post-structuralist inquiry is another concept that you might not have heard of before. It's a broad set of ideas that build upon social constructionist theory, and Foucault and Foucauldian work is placed within this broad set of ideas and broad approach. So what we're saying here is you don't have to follow the steps rigidly, but you do need to work within these assumptions that we've been talking about today. Right. So the group activity then, we're going to conduct a Foucauldian discourse analysis of the song She Said by PlanBUK. And to do this, we're first going to review Willig's 6 stages, then we're going to read the lyrics, then we're going to watch the music video, then we're going to ask you a quick question, an initial discussion about what's the song about, and then we're going to go through, and in your groups, we're going to analyse the video by first doing stage 1, 2 and 3 together, as they fit nicely together, then you're going to feed back, and then afterwards we're going to analyse stage 4, 5 and 6 together and feed back again. Okay. So if I've given everyone a copy of this, you've all got this sheet, and on these are the 6 stages. So what I've done here, I photocopied this part here, these 2 parts here, from Willig's chapter. And then what I've done here, so she's got the 6 stages down the side, with the types of questions that are related to each stage. But when I teach this with students, some of the questions and the wording is quite challenging to understand. So what I did for the students on this far left, I wrote down in the simplest language, everyday language I could think of, what these questions are referring to. So I've rephrased them. Okay, so I'll just go through the different stages now and try and explain it. Okay. So the first stage, discursive constructions. The questions that Willig asks is, how is this discursive object constructed through language, and what type of object is being constructed? For me, the simplest way I could phrase this is what things are being discussed. So when you're watching the video, if you're reading the lyrics, simply what are the things being discussed? I think it's quite an easy start. Okay, then stage 2, discourses. Willig asks what discourses are drawn upon and what is their relationship to one another. In my language, or in my everyday language, I said, are these things being discussed in different ways? So you've got the object, and then you can identify, are they being discussed in different ways? And we had a few examples already today of how that can happen. Stage 3 is action orientation. So the question that Willig asks are, what do these constructions achieve? What's gained from employing them? What are their functions? And what is the author doing here? I said, what are the consequences of this? Yes. So first, what topics are being discussed? What things are being discussed? Are they discussed in different ways? And then what's the consequence of discussing them in different ways? Okay. Stage 4 is positionings. So the question here is, what subject positions are made available by these constructions? And in my language, I translated this into what types of person are being discussed, e.g. an alcoholic, a student, a binge drinker. So those were like common subject positions with the topics that I was looking at with students. Okay, they're sort of like a type of person. Yeah. Okay, then stage 5, practice. Questions by Willig were, what possibilities for action are there mapped out by these constructions, and what can be said and done from within these subject positions? I said that this is acting as this type of person. So for example, if you're acting as a student, what can you say and do? What actions are like legitimate? Okay? And finally, subjectivity. What can potentially be felt, thought, and experienced from these subject positions? And in my language, I said, acting as this type of person, what emotions can be experienced? Okay? So any questions at the moment about these steps? It's quite challenging language to get your head around, but when you're doing the analysis, I would suggest that you could use the simple everyday language that I've put on the left-hand side to help. That's even easier. Right, okay, so first, what I'd like you to do before we play the video is I'll give you a couple of minutes just to read through the lyrics to familiarise yourself with the topic, just in case you've not watched the video before. So I photocopied the lyrics, you've got those on the back. And then it's got 2 pages, and at the bottom of the second page, there's a space for you to do your analysis when we get to it. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to read through the lyrics, and then I'll play the video afterwards. I'm going to play the video, and then afterwards we can, question I'm going to ask you to start with afterwards is what's the story about? Any thoughts? What's the song about? The story?
About night out. It's about a good night out.
Okay, it's about a good night out or a bad night out, depending on how you define it. Okay. Any other thoughts about what the story's about?
It's about rape.
It's about rape? Can you say a bit more?
She's accused him.
Right.
He's denying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So she's accused him and he's denying it, and now they're in the court of law to find out what happened or to see the repercussions. Yeah? Okay, cool. Right, so now what we need to do is, in your groups, using the sheets and the guidelines there, I'd like you to work through stages 1 to 3 together and have a chat on what your thoughts are. I'll come around and mingle and see how you're getting on. So it'll be about 5, 6, 7 minutes and we'll see how we go, and then you guys can feed back afterwards, okay? So just stages 1 to 3 and use those steps and questions that are written on there to help you. Okay? Okay, guys, come back, should we get some feedback? Okay. Okay, so when I first taught this 3 years ago, I found this video because I thought it had a really good story that was useful to try to analyse and do Foucauldian discourse analysis. To see whether it was accessible enough for my students, I asked my girlfriend, who's now my wife, to try and analyse it with me and to do the steps. And I thought, she's not a psychologist, she's not a social scientist, she's a chemical engineer, she's never done anything like this before. So I thought if she and I can do it together and she can understand, then the students will be able to understand. So what I'm going to do now is get you guys to go through each stage and feedback to me, to us, about what you found, and then we can bounce that off what me and my wife found when we analysed it. And it's not as if you've got the right answers or we have, it's just us thinking together, okay? So stage 1 then. Stage 1, which is discursive constructions, like objects of discourse. What objects of discourse did you identify? As in, what are the main things that are being discussed? Any thoughts?
Accusation.
Accusation. Okay. Anything else? Criminal justice. Any other topics?
Sexual relationships, consent. Gender.
Gender?
Yeah.
Okay.
Life of a musician.
Say again, sorry?
The life of a musician.
The life of a musician, yeah. Okay, cool. Any more for any more? Okay, lots there, okay. So, me and my wife, we identified what is sexual consent, what is sexual harassment, what is love. I know I heard one group over here talking about love, and innocence or guilt. Those were the things that we come up with, okay? So, we shared lots of the same thoughts as you guys. You guys got a few more, okay? The one that we got was the one-night stand. That was what we thought would happen, okay? The next stage then, we've identified the objects. Now we need to see how they're talked about from different perspectives and what's the relationships between these different perspectives. So what perspectives or what discourses did you identify? How these different objects were talked about? Any thoughts?
Well, the lyrics are essentially the perspectives of the accused man.
Right.
And then the video showed you a visual image of other people's perspectives, including barristers and the plaintiff and the jury.
Okay, so the argument on that is primarily at first from his perspective, because he's like the narrator, but he's also constructing these other perspectives through his song, or in the video you get the other perspectives of the jury and the plaintiff. Plaintiff is the person who's been...
I think I got the word wrong. I meant the person who's accusing him. What's she
Yeah.
called? Is that what's
She's
the right
plaintiff.
term?
Okay, so the person who's accusing him, which is the woman. Yeah. Okay, cool. Did anyone get anything else, or did you agree, or see anything different? Okay, so
we kind of saw that
yeah.
she never speaks herself,
Yes.
but there's some form of words of hers in his text. And how do we interpret that? We've seen that through his eyes.
Yeah, so you're seeing it through his... what words come up that tell you that?
She said, I know you, baby.
No, what her version?
Yeah, so you got, she said, like, the name of the song, isn't it? So he's like reporting, she said this, she said that, she did this, she did that. She's not saying it, I'm saying that she said it, yeah?
She's obsessed with.
She's obsessed, yes. Okay.
She's obsessed.
Yeah, so he says she's obsessed, yes. Yeah, so like we identified the same one, so we've got his perspective, her perspective, and the judge, jury, or like the law perspective. So we thought that his perspective, like he's the singer, he's the narrator, he's the one telling the story. And then you've got her perspective, which is reported by him, so she said, so I said, yeah, which you guys all identified. And then for us, we thought his and her perspectives were contesting the definition of the event. So they're fighting over what did actually happen. And then we thought that the judge, the jury, which is reported by him, so he said, so the jury. So in part, and also you can see the faces of the video, so that's where they come up. I think the jury come up more in the video than in the text. So this perspective seems to make the decision or the interpretation, who's credible? Do we believe him or do we believe her? Okay, that's what we got out of it. Stage 3, action orientation. So what's the consequence or the effect of these constructions of these different perspectives. Like, if we follow one perspective, what happens? If we follow the other perspective, what's the effect or consequence? Any thoughts on this one?
The eyes of the jury look threatening to him.
The eyes of the jury look threatening. Okay, so he's threatened by the jury. Why is he threatened by the jury? Like, what's the problem with the jury?
They're not buying it.
They're not buying it. Okay. And what's going to happen if they don't buy it?
It's going to go down.
He's going to go down. He's going to go down. He's going to go to jail, isn't he? Yeah, okay. Okay, so if we follow the jury perspective or her perspective, maybe he's going to go down.
So the discourse that we're following, though, would be not the discourse that he's presenting, but our interpretation of the discourse that she's presenting through him.
Yes.
Which would be a wronged woman who's been assaulted and taken advantage of. So that's the underlying discourse.
Yeah. From her perspective.
Yeah, from her perspective.
And if the jury agree with that.
If the jury agree with that and find it credible, he'll go to jail.
But then if we, what's the consequence of his perspective then? What's the effects if we like look at that one? So we looked at her and now him. Any thoughts about what's the consequence of the effect from his perspective?
So it might be undermining. So I also kind of thought about it in the Me Too time, like where you're being falsely accused. And so what does that then do to the power relationship, which is already present, and would that then just increase?
Yeah, so he's being falsely accused from his perspective, and that possibly wrongly go to jail, or so he's innocent. Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's see what we came up with. So we thought that the narrator is trying to defend himself, and the consequence of this is to be found innocent or guilty and go to jail or not. Yeah, so that's made a rich life perspective. Yeah. So that's more or less what we found. Yeah.
There's another one that we thought as well. Was this in terms of the consequence?
Yeah.
What's the consequence of one or other of these discourses on the listener or the viewer? I was thinking of great young men who listen to this and have their sense of being outsiders or somehow a persecuted group, young white men in particular, failing in school, not doing well, immigration. So one of the consequences I would say of this, if you take his story in critically and say, poor chap, you can then apply that and say, poor me.
So it's going to have a knock-on effects to the audience depending on your position. Okay.
And that their impact, therefore impact their relationships and their way to view women or whatever themselves.
Well, like when we get to it, I've added a stage 7, which is my own stage, which directly engages with the questions you're asking now, drawing upon these issues from our society that like impact upon this text. Okay, so when we get there, we'll come back to that question. I think. Yeah.
I actually see another consequence on her side. It's he's being proved to be innocent. It means she's an irresponsible, over-emotional, crazy woman.
Yes. So she's a liar. She's a crazy person. She's
rejected.
Yeah. So that's from one perspective. Yes.
That's the image of a be careful with women. There's women out there.
Most definitely. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's really good. So we've done the first 3 stages now. Okay, and we're all going in the right direction, I think. So now I'm going to give you some time to go through stages 4, 5, and 6. So now we're going to look at subject positions. So we're going to see like what are the subject positions. In other words, what type of people are positioned within these discourses, and then from these types of person, what can you say, do, and feel? And there is some examples in the text to help you there. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 10 minutes again to sort of go through this, and then we'll feedback. Okay. Sorry to interrupt the conversation. Okay, so stage 4 then. So now we're trying to look for subject positions, like types of characters, types of roles that are available in the discourses that we identify. What subject positions did you come up with? Any thoughts?
Superfan.
Superfan. So this is the woman, the superfan. Okay, it's a good one. Any more? I've heard lots of good ones. So just
we took the angle looking at the rapper, the map musician.
Yes.
And an outsider might say he's not being responsible in his behaviour to the fan. But from his world, within his world, he thinks that's normal behaviour.
Okay, so here we're talking about what's like legitimate behaviour. This sounds like step 5. Okay, so we'll get to that in a sec. We'll come back to, that's a really good point, we'll come back to that in a sec. So that position or his actions, so what would you like to label him? What type of character would you say that he is?
Irresponsible.
He's a pop star, isn't he? He's a pop star.
He's a pop star.
A pop star might be
money and fame.
Yeah. So pop star might be one, yes? So pop star might be like his subject position. He's taking the position, I'm a pop star, that's his position. From that position, he can then do those things that you were saying, okay? Any other subject positions that you identified?
Victims.
Victims, okay, can you explain a bit more on that one?
Well, the subject position, his subject position is, I'm the subject, I'm the victim of false accusation. And of course, what he's describing, he even says it in the text as well, he's describing a woman who then feels victimized by him, but incorrectly. But therefore, he's describing another victim subject, isn't he? So you've got two victims.
Two victim subject positions, his and hers.
Subject positions.
Yeah, okay, cool. Any more? Any other ones?
You said jury.
Yeah, so you've got the jury, and you've got, they're up there, aren't they? Like they come up in the video, don't they? Yes, you've got the position of the jury. Yeah, most definitely. Cool. Any other subject positions you identified? No? Okay, cool. So let's see what we come up with. We come up with victim, so exactly what you were just saying here, whether it's the man or the woman. So the narrator's position himself as the victim, the judge, the jury, and the woman position of woman as a victim. We got criminal or rapist, possibly. So we thought this is possibly how the jury are positioning him as a criminal or a rapist. We got obsessive fan. Nikki had super fan. We got obsessive fan. So here we got the narrator positioning her as an obsessive fan who's seeking revenge due to a broken heart. We also had cheater. Yes, so possibly he's cheating on his girlfriend. So he's actually got a girlfriend at the time, which you see in the video. And then you also see the cheated wife or / girlfriend who's up in the balcony. But you don't necessarily see that in the. Yeah. So she's
and you
up
see
in.
it here, it says in the gallery, my girl's crying in the gallery.
Oh, it does say that.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I thought it was the complaint.
Yeah, no, it's talking about.
So it does have the lyrics to support that interpretation
Well,
as
girl
well.
cries tears.
Yeah.
And then you've got the judge and jury, and then finally we thought the three most important ones were in orange. So yeah, we thought those three were possibly the most prominent ones. Okay, so lots of crossovers exactly with what you guys have been talking about. Okay, so now we're on stage 5, practice. What can be said and done from these positions? Any thoughts? What actions can you say and do from these positions?
What about being a cheater? Yeah, I think we need to go back on and add cheater to it.
Pardon?
We need to add cheater to it though.
Cheater too?
Cheater, because his girlfriend's crying in the gallery,
Cheater
it
was
suggests he was cheating on her,
Yes.
or whatever happened, and we want to, did we have that on?
Should be in orange, as they say.
So you think this one's really important, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, I think that
okay.
changes a lot of things.
Okay. Well, it's our partial perspective. You can, like, if you had some evidence, some data, some quotes to say that was more important, you could legitimately make the argument. Okay? So, what can be said and done from these positions? Any thoughts? What did you discuss? So you had a position already, which was from the position of like the rapper.
It's acceptable behaviour. It's expected of him, perhaps.
Yes.
From the outside, you think he's not being responsible to his fans.
Yeah.
He's leading her on.
Okay.
I thought that he was pleading and begging.
So this is from her perspective.
From his.
From his perspective?
Yeah, he pleads, doesn't he? And contests, pleading my case.
Oh, pleading. Yes. So from his perspective as the victim, he's allowed to plead his case. He's allowed to contest.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Most definitely. Yeah. He can stand up for himself. Yeah. And you've got some quotes there to support that. I'm innocent. I contested. Yeah. Any other things that can be said and done for these positions?
Well, he argues that she's acting illogically.
Yeah.
Crazy talk.
Yes. So, as a super fan or a crazy fan, it makes sense that she talks crazy and she acts crazy, or that's his
perspective.
That's his perspective on what's, yeah, most definitely. Okay, cool. So, let's see what we had. We had, from the position of man as victim, it's rational. He's got this rational discourse of sex or one night stand with no love and emotion is okay. So, building a bit upon what you were saying. We got obsessive love is crazy. Yes, so from his perspective, it's crazy that she's getting all obsessive, and it's okay to tell a woman to go away after having sex, even if she's emotional. It's not necessarily what I agree with, this is from his perspective, okay? The problem's her fault. She cannot separate the man from the music. It's her fault. Yeah? From the position of the woman as an obsessive fan, she's allowed to say crazy love talk, and she's expressive and declares her love. It makes sense from that position. Okay? Last one, subjectivity. What can be felt or experienced from these subject positions? What emotions, feelings came up from these positions? Pardon?
Like, from their perspective?
Yeah, from these different positions, from their perspectives.
He's nervous.
He's nervous? Yeah. Yeah, so he talks about being nervous, doesn't he? Yeah, he's potentially going to go to jail, isn't he, if he gets found out? Yeah. And it's making me nervous. Yeah. I just screwed up. Yeah.
She's rejected.
So she feels rejected. Yeah. So it makes sense that she's got this feeling of rejection from her position as crazy fan who's the victim. Yeah. Most definitely. Okay. Cool. I think that's the same as what we got. Yeah. So we got as a male victim, he feels misunderstood. Criminal, he's nervous, scared, and prejudged. Yep, so there's that quote that you just had there that supports that. As the obsessive fan, she's got this intense emotional attachment and rejection, which you noted. Okay, so in summary then, our sort of conclusion was that the function of the song is to enable the narrator to present himself as a victim, but the dilemma in the song is to decide who is the victim, whether it is with a subsequent decision leading to accusations of rape or false allegations. And finally, this is the extra step that we were brainstorming, which is building upon what you were saying here, was to try and connect this specific text with wider social and cultural discourses in the UK at the moment. Because it links, this text isn't just free floating, it links into our society. So here are some of the things that we thought might be relevant to make sense of the text. We've got gender, one-night stands and casual sex, rape, locating the man as a perpetrator, victimhood, legal mistreatment, arguments that some laws favour women, but then also a feminist challenge to this that media and research suggests that rape victims are treated very poorly by police. So there's lots of these kind of discussions going around in our society, and this video sort of can be made sense of partly by engaging with these, we think, as well. Okay, so I know we've a couple of minutes over, but I just, if you don't mind saying, I only have a couple of minutes, I was just going to ask you to think about any questions or concerns you've had with the workshop, or any questions you want clarifying, or any thoughts about how you might take some of the stuff we've learned today and apply it in your own research. Okay, so maybe I'll just give you a minute to have a quick chat with your group, and then feedback, if that's okay. Yeah. Any questions? Okay, so first question, any concerns, clarifications, or questions about the method or social constructionism? Yes.
I wanted to ask, why did Foucault come to the conclusion that power was held in tension rather than not held structurally by a group?
Can you say that one more time, please? Sorry.
I'm wondering why Foucault came to the conclusion power, as you described it, is held in tension.
In tension.
Yeah.
Tension, right.
Rather than by one group in particular, like a Northern capitalist.
I think he was trying to move away from the idea that certain institutions, whether it be the government or the police, hold most of the power. And I think he saw everyday relationships sort of being negotiated and challenged, and power relations were filtered down through every process of society. And it's not just a top-down people who've got the most power sort of influencing the bottom. There's also this bottom-up kind of impact. You can see that now if you think about YouTube and participatory culture. People were producing things from a base-up level as well. So I think that was one of his goals, to get away from this top-down view. And we do what we're told by the powerful people, and just showing how people can negotiate and resist from everyday levels and everyday interactions. That's what I understood. What were you thinking? Did you think something else?
I was wondering whether French Marxists believed in or not. I don't know anything about them, whether they bought it or not.
Well, now, at least in the literature, there's multiple understandings. Lots of people still do follow the Marxist conception. It's very popular. But then there's also some people who follow Foucauldian construction, some people follow other ones, some people combine them. So there's multiple ways. I'm not saying you must follow this, it's just one option. Any other questions about that?
I think there's something else on the power of Foucault. I think what he was trying to do as well was to look at the power structure and say that got that way because of the things. And there's different influences, and if you go back in history, you can see how it was seen differently. It's seen differently there, it challenges their power. So all those kind of dynamics going on as well.
So it's like shifting power
If you
over time.
if you don't accept that power is located somewhere and owned, then it raises one's consciousness in terms of one's ability to resist, give over, apply, etc. So, you know, what Frere's term conscientization, isn't it? Is the idea that actually the king has no clothes. It's the idea that actually the power resides there because we participate and allow it.
Yeah.
And if we didn't allow it, it wouldn't. And you could say, well, if I've got a big stick, I've got a big stick. But nevertheless, my response to your having a big stick gives me power.
Sorry to butt in, but it seems like people have got things to do now. So I'm willing to stay for another 10 minutes, have a chat. If you want to have a chat about your research, how you might want to integrate this or any ideas. So, but just thank you very much for coming. And if you want to become associated with the Qualitative Research Forum, just leave your email address, I'll add you to the list. And then lots of events coming up over the future, and you guys can think of your own events that we can do as well. That'd be great. Okay, thank you very much. And take care.